I'd like to welcome all of you to our third annual CollabTech. It's exciting to see all of you here, seeing a full house for a full day. So looking at my notes, I do want to tell you who I am. I'm Wendy Shapiro here at Case Western Reserve, and I am hosting in behalf of all of my colleagues here at Case, and we welcome you here today. Before I do anything else, I do want to thank our sponsors who have helped us have this day. And on that list, we have Adobe, who will be talking more about a partnership we have. We'll talk about that a little later. Apple, Dell, IBM, Google, Promotional Solutions, and Food for Thought. So I do want to thank you for your support and ask really all of you for maybe a round of applause for our sponsors. I also want to tell you before I get any further that at the very end, at the conclusion of our final panel today, we are going to have a raffle, and we do have many prizes we're giving away. The grand prize today is a computer from Dell. So come on back into the room. You have to be here in order to win the prize, but we do have many prizes, many of them. So we have a full day today. We've already kicked off with a pre-session of Fiber to the Home for those of you who are here, and actually there was quite a lot of you here, so there's an interest, and Cleveland is rising. The thing about today's focus is on transforming education through collaboration. And what you'll notice today in our sessions is that the technology is going to be kind of taking on a supporting role, and it's the learning, creativity, and global participation that's moving forward into center stage. We have two plenary sessions today, one that's going to happen momentarily on remaking education, and later today on international collaboration. And many breakout sessions that will happen on this floor and upstairs. So we have many signs around you. Find your way, ask anybody, you'll get where you're going. At lunch, over lunch today, we have our keynote speaker with us. That is going to be a great talk, Howard Rheingold, and he'll be introduced at lunchtime, so we're very excited to have you, Howard. He'll be talking about social media, participative pedagogy, and digital literacy. Like last year, all of our sessions are being streamed live. They will be captured, except one. They will be captured, and you can watch them after, or tell your friends, hey, this was a great one, you got to go to the website and take a look at this. As well as, and I see that the light is actually off that screen right now, but everything will be streamed through Second Life. And with that, if there are questions that are coming in through Second Life, those people can also participate in question and answer. So now, let me take a minute to introduce Casey Green, who will be our moderator. We're so glad you're here, Casey. You got a little caught up in traffic this morning, but he's here. Casey is the founding director of the Campus Computing Project. This is a project that's been going on for over 20 years, in which he investigates e-learning and information technology, analyzing trends in American education, and I think it actually goes beyond America now. Casey received the first EDUCAUSE Award for leadership in public policy. So, and each year, each of our 3 years, Casey has been gracious enough to be our moderator on our panel, and I do want to thank him particularly for helping. I appreciate your effort and coordination. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Casey.
Great. Yeah. Well, good morning. Here we are again. This is the third CollabTech conference, maybe just as a way of having the kind of the summer camp experience at the beginning of the conference. How many of you were here last year? And how many of you are here for the first conference? Okay, so it's either you get the day off or this has redeeming value for your time. We're delighted to have you. The opening panel each year has been an attempt to frame the issues for the day. It's a methodology that none of us learn in graduate school, but has real applications in real life, and it's the parable of the blind men touching the elephant. And in this case, we have 4 people from very different perspectives touching the issue of collaboration, and hopefully the gestalt works that the sum is more than the parts in terms of our conversation. I'm going to do very quick introductions, and then we're going to move very quickly into the conversation among the panelists. To my left and your right, and my throwaway line of this, of course, is this is a geographical, not a political statement. I have to say that in any state, and especially Ohio these days. Joe Lambert is the Executive Director for the Center for Digital Storytelling. Sitting next to Joe is Stacy Williams, who is President of Speech Pathology, but she's here wearing her tweeds today. She's with the Department of Speech Communication Sciences at Case Western Reserve, does work about pedagogy and communication issues. Next to Stacy is Trent Batson with ABLE. He'll explain the acronym in his first 10 seconds when he gets his question. And finally, at the far right of your stage and the far left of mine, and not just because he's from California, is John Schuman from Adobe. So let me try and frame this very quickly. We are now officially in, I think, what we could call the 4th decade of the so-called computer revolution of higher education that began, pick it, with the Apple II, the IBM PC. At some point along the way, these technologies fostered, enabled great aspirations, great expectations about what we could do with information technology as a resource, particularly with collaboration. And in the conversation today about collaboration, I think the question we'd like to frame it, and Wendy gave us this in her opening comments, it's the supporting role of technology. How is that as a resource to reach the desired ends? And the question is, in the context of collaboration, resources and tools, how far have we come? What's the distance yet to go? And in one sense, what's the ratio? Because we like to think of these in quantitative metrics, and sometimes, what's the ratio between our reach and our grasp? In other words, what we would like to do and the distance we have traveled and the distance we really need to go. Between our aspirations and our accomplishments, the tools at hand versus the tools we truly and really need. And as part of this conversation, it's not just about the technology, but it's also about the supporting infrastructure and organizational culture that may, or in some cases may not, foster and encourage collaboration. So, John, I'm going to turn to you and not hold you accountable for the sins of the industry, but as the one person who actually works in the industry from Adobe, and ask you from an Adobe perspective and beyond. You know, we have a number of sort of what I would characterize as tier 1 collaboration tools. We can put notes on Acrobat documents. We can track editing of various documents along the way. What's the status of collaborative tools today? And again, not just from Adobe, but as we look across the IT industry.
Well, I think we're seeing several major technology trends that are kind of converging at this point in time, which I think is rather interesting. And in my opinion, will have a profound effect on collaboration. I agree with your terminology on there's so many different tiers of collaboration tools and technology. Obviously, from the Adobe perspective, it's more of what we might refer to also as document-based collaboration or web-based collaboration with a document aspect to it. So on the trends, obviously, cloud computing is something that, you know, a few years ago I didn't see moving so quickly, especially in higher education, as it seems to be today. So the adoption rate of cloud computing has been, frankly, a bit of a surprise to me. And a good thing in moving forward in the technology, I think, because that'll remove some of the barriers that we've had for adoption of these more advanced digital document collaboration tools such as the ones that we work in. The other thing, and I think that brings some new problems into play as well. One of the things that we're wrestling with is, and a lot of people with cloud-based computing are wrestling with today, are better ways of doing authentication. That's something that's starting to settle in terms of standards, and I think it's going to play an important part of wider adoption of collaboration tools in education. So right now I look at it as a barrier. Yeah.
Because I think we need to stretch out this issue of authentication. For many of us, I think there's 2 or 3 levels of it. One, it's authentication of, am I an authorized user? Can I touch or change this document? 2, increasingly, because of digital tools, is the document authentic?
Right.
And can you take us through through that a little bit more?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good point. The validating the information that you're getting and being able to identify that with a kind of watermarking or digital ID and be able to carry these identification markers not only through documents but through individuals as well. So you know that the person that you're talking with on the collaboration tool is that indeed that person, and they have authority to be in that space, and that the documents you're working with are also authorized. So various technologies are emerging around that. You know, some of the ones that we're working with, you know, is SAML-based federated ID authentication, and then also tying that into the validation of the document. So if we're talking about, like from Adobe's perspective, a PDF document, we want to avoid the barrier of having to identify yourself multiple times. We all understand that that's definitely a roadblock to better collaboration. So,
Stacy, I want to move from John's conversation about documents into the whole issue, collaboration on media. I mean, we think about students today, flip cameras, stuff that's on their phones, everything else. For me, when I understand the collaboration on documents. For me, at least my image, when people collaborate on media, however, it's not a matter of that they're tagging different files and moving it back and forth. I still think of sort of a version of the editing room. How do we deal with collaboration with media?
Sure. You know, when I think of media, oftentimes I think as we sit here and look at Second Life and we look at virtual world technology and what it represents, because it really embodies collaboration as I see it, primarily because it's extending beyond the classroom, opening it up for real world situations and scenarios, which is critical for what we need in the teaching, you know, environment. It promotes that shared learning, and it really creates what I call active problem solving and successful teamwork. And that's how the students...
In the creation, or is it collaboration in the consumption?
I think in both, but primarily more, as I see it, more in the consumption. And I can give you an example for teaching. In my classroom, I collaborate with a dental school, and here I'm a speech-language pathologist. So we bring the students together to work with virtual patients. They can go up into Second Life, and together they're working together to problem solve and actively try and diagnose patients and work together collaboratively. So again, as they're coming together and learning how to work successful in teams, and I think that's what it's all about.
Joe, let me move this conversation from documents to media to storytelling, because it seems to me storytelling in some ways can encompass all these things. And yet, as I think about storytelling, to me, that, you know, the history, the cultural, that's an individual activity, or am I wrong? Thinking about storytelling as a collaborative event.
I think
the consumption, creation, and consumption.
You know, in some ways, obviously, the storytelling begins with listening, not with story. That you have to have an audience and a connection to audience in a way of collaborating with somebody else. And it seems to me the ideas that we're moving from a kind of data stand world where we have a lot of data and the need for synthesizing information and becomes an act of listening and sharing. And inevitably, that move towards Storyland to a kind of world where reflection and in a sense, contemplative or mindful awareness about the data and the research that's going on and its meaning in the world is an important part of all of these processes, because it's what holds people together once they're in the same room, once they're sharing the ideas that need to be analyzed.
I think perhaps for the audience who are not familiar with digital storytelling, if you can give us a couple of extra words to give us a foundation for the activities of the center.
Well, I mean, the essential work that we do is teaching people some essential tools, starting with Adobe tools many years ago, to make short films based on lived experience about the subjects that are important to them. And in the format, it's usually a workshop environment, but really the emphasis is on the idea of taking big ideas and shrinking them down into really, really, really tight narrative and stories that can, one, affect your mind and the issues you're interested in, but more to the point, pull from your heart and try to make a difference.
But something you said a few moments ago strikes me, that you mentioned data. I'm a defrocked social scientist in terms of my formal training. I don't think of, at least my training didn't tell me to tell stories with data. It told me to report data. You know, narrative was not part of the training that many of us in quantitative social sciences or the sciences have. It seems to be more the folks in the other culture. But I'm assuming from what you've said, in fact, that that's something that would, your version of data is an expansive version.
Well, I mean, I'm really intrigued right now with the book Black Swan, and I'm about the problem with the idea that data sometimes doesn't really get to truth because of the outlier events that cause truth to happen. I think in many of our cultures, outlier experience is described in story, and it gives us a way to deal with extreme circumstance when change is not predictable. To me, in all of the sciences, there's a need for that kind of awareness of exception to what the data is telling you, and the possibility that that oil rig out in the Gulf might in fact explode and cause great damage that the British Petroleum analysis didn't expect it to happen.
Yeah, that 1 out of 3,400 is an outlier, but that's a fairly important outlier today.
It's a very big outlier that changes a lot of the story, right?
Trent, let me turn to you as well. Again, I think connotatively, many of us think of e-portfolios as kind of an individual, not a collaborative experience, or it's the collaboration between a student and a mentor, as opposed to a broader kind of, it's not a team event, if you will. The way business schools and other academic groups and professions have tried to move towards team building as part of the academic training in certain areas. Correct my inference, if you would, for the audience.
Yeah, electronic portfolios, and that's the basis or the community out of which we built the Association for Authentic, Experiential, and Evidence-Based Learning, which is what ABLE stands for. Actually announced that new organization right here last year, so it's been a good year. But getting to Casey's question, portfolios have been thought of as something that an individual student uses to collect evidence about their work during a semester, during a college career, during a program, whatever. And the emphasis has not been on sharing with other people, but most electronic portfolio applications do allow you to set up groups. So you can work with other students in a shared environment. You can collaborate with your teacher. In a sense, you can collaborate off campus when you're doing experiential work, internships or service learning, by collecting video clips, audio clips, photos, comments from people you work with in those experiential experiences. So in some ways, it's like Facebook. It has, your own personal collection of things. You have your own photos or your own friends and so forth, but it also is essentially a social media application, and I think it's becoming more and more that way. You can also, a student can collaborate not only with their current student peers in a class, but with future teachers, because they still have their collection from semester to semester, so they can still share work with and talk with other future courses and people that they work with. But what we're finding is that collecting the work itself, and I think a lot of people say this is evidence-based learning, this is good, but what is really important is the discussion around the evidence, the comments and reflections that people are making, either in a collaborative group or singly. And so the future of portfolio, and this is, our association is international, and we are pushing things in certain ways. And so we're saying that the future of portfolio is going to be collecting the comments and reflections about the work and focusing more on how students interpret their evidence rather than just showing the evidence. So that's the future direction. So you're collecting things collaboratively, but you're presenting individually. So that's with the portfolio.
I want to try and make a connection between, Trent, something that you just said about this collaboration around a portfolio, and Stacy, your earlier comment about Second Life, doing dental training in Second Life. My wandering of the web informed me that you were doing some work in Second Life, what in internet time would have been eons ago. in the early days of Second Life, if this is sort of its childhood. What's the collaborative dimension there, and how does being collaborative in a virtual world differ from being collaborative in I don't want to say a real world, but let's say a physical world?
Right. I think, again, what Second Life is able to bring to a classroom environment, again, is that real world scenario approach that oftentimes we struggle, I find, in a learning environment in terms of the transfer and generalization that we all struggle with. Students are getting the knowledge and skills, but we lack an environment at times that they can practice in a safe environment, especially looking at medical and healthcare types of situations. The nice part is, again, that it allows us to be interdisciplinary, bringing in, like you said, the dental, communication disorders, varieties of students, where I can create one virtual patient and target a variety of learning objectives for a variety of students, again, across disciplines, which really has been powerful because it teaches, about what teamwork is all about and that we all have to work together and communicate for common goals. And that's really what Second Life has enabled us to do. And you're right, from when we started, there were limitations with the technology, motives and things like that we've really come a long way. And what the research has shown us when we've asked all those students across the board, compare traditional modes such as using standardized patients where I have to pay someone to role play versus going into Second Life and having the instructor sit behind an animated character and, and do the same types of things. They treat them equally. And really, when you look at it, it offers an immersive learning environment, keeps them very engaged, and really has high levels of visualization. Things, again, I could never accomplish in a classroom, but could definitely in a virtual environment.
It seems the other thing about a virtual environment, though, it fosters synchronous collaboration as opposed to asynchronous collaboration. Right. And so much of our experience with collaboration, because it's document-based, and across place, whether it's one part of a campus to another, or down a hallway, or across time zones, is asynchronous. Let me get each of you to sort of talk about that. Joe, let me begin with you about the asynchronous versus synchronous aspects of collaboration.
Well, I mean, in the context of the work that we do, we obviously still have a great sense that when you create anything, a story, in the case of our work, that when people are listening to you, it shapes the story. And while, as you said, the conception is that storytelling is a singular activity, it's something you go off to do, you write your story, you create your story, you edit it in a small dark room somewhere. The fact of the matter is it starts with the idea that there's an exchange of what you think is valuable in the information with an audience, a first audience, and what we call a story circle. And for us, the environments that we create that allow story listening at various stages of a productive process is critical. And for us, the more the asynchronization links back into these moments of time of group reflection, the more valuable the process is.
In other words, the audience is a collaborator in this context, where in many other contexts, this one, for example, at least till we get to questions, the audience is not necessarily a collaborator. Is that correct?
Well, the audience is both collaborator and creator in this sense.
Collaborator, creator, consumer.
Each person is also engaged in their own part of the process.
Stacy, other thoughts about the asynchronous versus synchronous aspects?
I mean, when we start to look at the synchronous aspects of it, what I find is powerful is, again, what's happening right here now, the discussions and all of the things that actually come out of that, that becomes a very powerful learning tool, obviously because it's happening in real time. But the asynchronous as well is important, again, being able to, work in teams and across environments too, so.
Trent?
Yeah, I actually taught using a synchronous tool for about 10 years.
And coming full circle on some of this, aren't we?
Yeah, I know, right.
In one sense, the early advantage of the web and these tools were you didn't have to be there to participate, right, to comment, to collaborate. And in one sense, whether it's virtual worlds or in other contexts, we are now coming back full circle, or at least we're sort of working at two levels. I'm sorry.
It's a very different quality of conversation. Yeah. The real-time communication chat, you essentially get a more informal conversation. People will say things off the cuff. They'll say things that they don't reflect on before they say it. So in a sense, it's bringing out a kind of conversation that you normally don't have in an academic setting, where everyone is speaking, formally on topic, and that's the questions are about on topic. And that's true of asynchronous. People have time to think about what they say, so they try to stay on topic, which means like the formal, what I call the first voice kind of conversation. Everyone in their heads has, and we've discovered this within linguistics, discourse analysis, that there are almost always three threads. There's your on-topic, conversation in your head that you're paying attention and thinking about that. And then there's a reflective voice, the second voice, where you're making informal comments to yourself about what the teacher's talking about or what the person you're talking to is talking about. And then there's the third voice, which is completely off topic. I lost my keys. Where's my car? Oh, I didn't eat lunch yet. Those are completely off. And so, and usually in academic interactions, you have the focus on the topic. And people say, if you're off topic, that's bad. Well, I think it's good, because now we have tools where we can collect that second voice. That
you can find my keys?
Yeah, right. It's the reflective voice, the second voice, the voice where you're thinking about the actual topic, and you're saying, I don't understand that, or what does that mean, or how does that connect with what we just said before, or I lost you 5 minutes ago. So it's a reflection on the first voice, and we've only been able to deal with the first voice in the classroom up until now. But now we have tools we can start to collect those reflective comments, and that's what we want to develop.
John, so let me turn to you about the tools as somebody who's involved as a designer and a company that's clearly involved with providing these tools. I'm not asking for state secrets out of Adobe, but does the conversation that we've been having the last couple of minutes about asynchronous versus synchronous collaboration, how does that sort of change so much of what's been done? Because so much of what we've been provided in the past has really been with the understanding that it's all going to be asynchronous.
Well, from my point of view, my mantra is all about metadata. Okay. Now, how I turn that into this conversation is simply that when we have an asynchronous meeting, so many, how many times have we all experienced this? We have a meeting and we're brainstorming and all these great ideas come out, and then you get busy, you sidetracked, and you want to go back to that, and maybe you made a video recording of that. And then, but who's got time to sit through that 2-hour video and try to find that one point where somebody said something that meant a lot and that you want to retrieve? So metadata and being able to easily add data points to any kind of capturing of collaboration, I think, is key. As information proliferates, this is our challenge in technology, is to be able to manage all this information. I think this really is an important part of collaboration, is being able to go back and retrieve that information easily. So metadata is kind of our mantra, and that ties into our tool strategy. Being able to turn speech into text and to be able to mark that easily, quickly. These are the kind of, without giving up state secrets, are some of the things.
So everybody has to raise their hand. We're under a group NDA, is that correct?
No. But that is definitely some of the things we're working hard on and to try to resolve those kind of.
And let me come back to the panel individually to something that you said earlier, John, and that is how the cloud changes, or at least affects, the conversation of collaboration. Again, let me just sort of go down the panel. Joe, what does the cloud do in this context?
I'm mainly thinking about the way it's changing my organization, which is a learning organization stretched across, a couple of countries and several continents, and it obviously in the way that we think about the way we can put together a functioning national, and I'm thinking about this because I just came out of our first national organizational retreat, and our ability to design an organization through an environment like, in this case, Google Docs, and naming names, is incredible. And our ability to, now investigating Wave, another Google technology, has made it possible for something as, really diverse of the kinds of work that we do, and they're across a lot of different territories, for synthesis and metadata, and essentially in our own process, to take place. We still have some learning to do about how to make stories through those processes, But the editing work that we've done, I can think of a case recently where we were doing very specific work with the Canadian Schizophrenic Society, and we were able to collaborate through, I don't think it was a Google Doc, but essentially an exchange of documents through a moderated website with these students that, you know, were in all sorts of contexts, in all sorts of environments, and who had an enormous amount of vulnerability because of their condition.
Trent, how's the cloud change or affect?
This is the century of the mobile learner.
Right.
Portfolios were stored on campus for a long time. Now they're mostly subscription models so that they're in the cloud. You gain access to your portfolio in the cloud, and that means that anywhere you go, of course, you have it available. So it's a very, I mean, that is the way it should be going. And so we now have instances of companies selling portfolio accounts to individuals, and not, you know, not through your university or through your institution, but actually just directly to a person. So that there are some companies now you can actually just go online and purchase an e-portfolio for yourself. So that's I think partly the the whole cloud
unreasonable to
computing.
think that LinkedIn and others are going to start offering some variation as an extension of their services as well, right?
Yes. Yep.
Stacy?
I mean, as I see it from a faculty-student perspective, I mean, what I see is increased connectivity and accessibility overall to resources and new pathways to learn. So, I mean, I think it's exciting.
Between the cloud and the non-cloud, the way some of us who have more history or legacy systems?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think they really give it a second thought. I mean, we're talking about digital natives. So to them, I think, second nature. So they really don't even question it. The frustration, I think, more comes, like I said, with that connectivity at times is we're using a variety of different technologies and educating them on how to use them and get the access they need.
There is the old joke in the technology industry about why God could create the world in 6 days and rest, because there were no legacy systems and legacy users. And at least looking at the gray or thinning hair among some of us, we are the legacy system and the legacy users in higher ed. John, back to you about the cloud.
There's some really exciting aspects to this technological trend. One is it's providing
I want to push this too, because I want to deal with the aspect of not just documents, but also collaborative media, because these are separate, parallel, but increasingly overlapping worlds. And
absolutely.
As Stacy said, your students don't differentiate. It's just stuff, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So any kind of information, put it that way. Cloud computing is providing a leapfrog platform, for one thing. You no longer have to have the computing power that you used to have to do the kind of things that we need to do going forward. So it's a great thing for the developing world. You can have a real, low form factor device and do some really powerful computing with cloud computing now. So that's a huge impact. The other impact that I see on a more daily basis is that there's this shift going on in IT departments all over the world. Instead of the IT people planning their deployment of their servers, they're turning their attention to something that I think is far more important, which is database architecture, to being able to plan and manage that information, like I was talking about earlier. That's really what our key benefit, as far as I'm concerned, of cloud computing is going to be better and easier access to more information.
Trent, with due respect to your academic training and background as an English professor and the tweed jacket that you brought today, you are, for many outside of academia, the archetype of, in terms of somebody in a classroom teaching text or working off of text. As you think about the conversation we're having and the experiences over your career, what are the collaborative tools that have arrived that are doing well? And what's the one tool that you'd like to have that we don't have today in terms of the issues and needs of your students then and now, and those who would be your students in the future?
One tool I'd like to have.
What's the collaborative resource that's missing today?
Oh boy, good question.
Good stall.
Nice way to throw me a curveball here. I don't know. I don't want to say portfolio again, but
Okay.
But all over again. I don't know. I guess
What's missing in the toolkit?
Digital storytelling. I mean, part of what we're looking at is building a digital identity, and that for lifelong learners, this is key. Some states, Minnesota, California, Pennsylvania, are requiring portfolios for all citizens. England, parts of England are doing that. And the idea is that over a lifetime, somehow you can build a digital identity and have evidence and have ways to build your career and so forth. And this seems to be important in this age when so much is happening virtually. So it's it's a different kind of existence. And so ways to build a digital identity over time, ways to create artifacts that feed easily into a system that you have control, ways to capture conversations, ways to synthesize at different points in your life as to what you've
about
done.
John's point, we need an easy way to do metadata.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And make metadata accessible to civilians conceptually and otherwise.
It also ties into one other point I said earlier about ID, your digital ID, and being able to take that with you wherever you go, and have your career, your education experience, everything is there, and you don't have to go digging around on different hard drives to find these artifacts that you've created throughout your career.
Stacy, what's the tool we're missing?
I
mean, if you think about a wish list of what you've got, where we've come and where we go.
Sure, and my passion and research has always been around simulation technology and continuing to develop that, but I'd have to say, I think it's more in developing what I call more intuitive user interface overall, that we have to make the technology transparent. I just recently finished teaching a hybrid course here at Case, and I have to tell you, across all of my course evaluations, I see statements like from the students that they're still fighting the technology and they feel that it interferes with the learning process at some point. And I use Adobe Connect, and I'm using Fronter personal learning systems, and I throw all these different technologies we're merging together to try and exemplify the collaboration overall. But really, we need to get that technology to a transparent level so that, I think, the learning can come through, because that's the ultimate goal. So that's really on my wish list, is just to continue to bring that forward.
Joe, what's your wish list?
Well, first is patience as a tool.
I can't buy patience
Yeah,
from
I know.
Adobe.
I didn't think you had that.
Is there an Adobe patience product that's coming?
I think.
Have you guys trademarked that yet?
Yeah, exactly. In 1993, I think I said that our work would become realistic when there was a camera that knew what picture it took and would remind you to put the metadata on it. It wouldn't, it wouldn't wait for you to download it and then type it in or put it up in the Flickr and make notation. It's almost like saying, I won't let you put it up in the Flickr until you put some notation on this, because you're going to forget what you took and who it is and da-da-da. And we need the visual, we need it almost to know I've taken a picture of you, because I took a picture of you before, and so it's smart enough. And we're very close to all that. But I think that makes a huge difference in the way we amalgamate the memory boxes of our lives.
Terrorist Times Square SUV automatically tags the metadata.
Yeah, well,
All right.
Outlier event.
Yeah, well, that's right. So let me close our conversation before we go to the audience. Wendy, in her opening comments, said we need to focus on the supporting role. So I want to bring us to a conversation a little bit about culture. Higher education is notoriously risk aversive. We eat our young routinely. How does the culture foster or impede collaboration? Colleague to colleague, faculty member trying to foster collaboration among students who in one sense are saying, not in my interest to collaborate because this is my grade, not the team's grade, that's going to affect what I do in terms of getting out of this course, my GPA, my career, med school, law school, something. Stacy, I'm going to go to you because you just came out of the classroom.
Right.
And you're an assistant professor.
Correct. I could talk on both sides of this issue. I think from the student standpoint, it's not a choice because, again, I tie everything back to the real world situation in our classrooms, and we have to learn to work together as a team. So they're going to be successful. If they're successful collaborators, they're going to be successful in my courses. And that's a skill set that I teach and provide. So it's really not an option to go that route. In terms from a faculty perspective, the challenges I find that I've faced in the past as well is that, one, it's in educating other faculty members, because technology can be scary at times with what it represents, and it's time consuming to do those types of changes in our own teaching and curriculum. As well as, I'll be honest with you, I found it's been challenging at times to get published in particular journals in my field, simply because the focus hasn't always been on collaboration, teaching, and learning. It's much more on the research from a patient perspective or interventions that we offer. So there have been struggles at times on both sides, from faculty and from students.
John, you get to watch the academic circus.
Right. So, as an outsider looking in, you know, on a really positive note, I think the trends and changes I've been seeing lately, looking in to the institution, are positive. And cloud computing is one of those, like I said earlier, it took me by surprise, because there was this, you know, in the 5-6 years ago, you know, there was definitely this very siloed mentality. Of this is my server at my college, and you can't talk to my server, and we're separate IT departments, and everything's so disparate and sometimes disorganized. And I'm really seeing some major changes in that. This institution certainly, you know, is an example of that new trend, and that speaking across all these different communities within a larger institution. So there's some really positive changes I'm seeing there. That are coming about.
Trent?
Yeah.
Well, I think the collaboration in the classroom or in an academic setting, you can either use that for inspiration. You know, students work together for a while to get some ideas, and then they go and do the work individually, or you can set it up so that it's actually a team project. And I don't think that a lot of teachers have practice in how to set that up. And I saw a really good example at MIT of an instructor who assigned roles to each of the team members. I think other people do that, other than this one professor, but it's a good idea of, you know, assigning, you know, one is a statistician, one is a publicist, one is the web developer, one is the researcher. And so they each have different roles for about 2 weeks. They're working on the same problem, and then they switch roles. And so then you have evidence of each person's work, and you know that not just one person is doing all the work. And I think it's that kind of thinking that's needed because I think so much of what I hear is teachers saying, well, how do you grade collaborative work? And that seems to be one of the big barriers. But I think if people start thinking more imaginatively about how it's structured, then we'll move forward with it.
You know, I'd like to say I have hope for the higher education world.
Higher ed, Joe. We need lots of hope.
Yeah. You know, a lot of the work we do is about the bridges between communities and institutions, higher ed institutions. To me, I definitely have seen that technology has changed the way communities and universities collaborate. I've seen a lot of ways that the stories from both sides, whether it's town and gown contradictions or some other kind of, you know, difficulty in the way that people relate to each other. I've seen these tool sets assisting, you know, storytelling in particular, assisting in building bridges where there used to be walls. And I think that's a vital new part of what we're doing.
Great. All right, I want to thank the panel. And now we're going to collaborate with the audience. We have a couple of minutes to take questions. So the rule of question is, if you would kindly speak to the microphone, tell us who you are, so the panel can make inferences about your question before you actually ask it. And maybe inappropriate, maybe appropriate. Sir.
Hi, I'm Rick Kramer. I'm with Case Western, and this question is directed to John Schuman.
What do you do with Case Western? Help our inference agent.
I'm in Information Technology Services.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. To John Schuman and Trent. And when we talk about evidence and collecting evidence, such as a portfolio, now that we can collaborate, that information tends to become more user-centric than in the past. Having been in IT, as Casey can say, for a long time, it was very institutionalized. So being able to authenticate the information is very important. I'd like to, and how do you see that going forward?
Well, I mean, using a portfolio, the teacher authenticates the work. I mean, because it's handed in to the teacher, still graded. It's just a place to keep the evidence. So if you're talking about some evidence that's related to field work, for example, and so forth, and,
I'm talking about information that's collected, say, over your lifetime. You're talking about putting together
right.
Sorry about that. You're talking about putting together a portfolio of life's work. And so that as you move from institution to private companies to everyone else, that information needs to go with you, not just stay with the institution. So as we start talking about the cloud and that information being in different places, ownership and authentication becomes very important.
Right. So the institution does certify, you know, the information or whatever's collected over time. But in practice, like you know, like during a semester teaching, my solution was always to have them do so much work that I became so familiar with all their work that I could tell when they were putting stuff in that clearly wasn't their own. But it's always up to the institution to certify. So when a student has a portfolio and they're graduating, you know, the institution stamps and says, yes, we certify that this is this student's work. Go ahead.
So, yeah, I think it's a great topic of discussion. It's one of those things, I actually brought it up earlier, you know, I think it's one of the things that's still a bit unresolved. A lot of, you know, very important standards bodies and great thinkers are working on this problem, as well as technology companies such as my own, and Google's doing a lot of work around this idea, this concept of a digital identification. The old idea of J. Schuman at hotmail.com following you around your whole life is kind of crazy, you know. You need an ID that you can use, and as your life changes, as you go through different changes, as you go from a student to a career, you need to have an ID go with you. So this is one of those pieces of technology that isn't quite settled yet, but it's an interesting time to look into it. I invite you, as an IT professional, to get involved, you know, with this conversation with some of these standards groups, such as Trent's. They're talking about that. There's other ones that I'm involved with, like IMS Global. Recently, we've been working on talking about this. So hopefully, this will all get resolved in a logical manner pretty soon. I think we're getting to that point.
And there are those parts of our portfolio we never want anybody to ever find again as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. All right.
That's the other
That's the other
aspect.
part of it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. We got one question from Second Life.
Can you hear me? No? Yes, it's supposed to be on. Oh.
The bridge.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry. We have a question here from Delightful Duwangle, who is one of our avatars.
Which is a portfolio identity in Second Life.
Yeah.
That's going to stay with that person forever.
Exactly.
Delightful, how are you today?
There's a little bit of a delay, but she seems to be enjoying everything tremendously,
Great.
so thank you. Her question is, it says, Gartner advocated industries create centers of excellence for collaboration. Do we need that?
6 seconds, Centers of Excellence for Collaboration. Sure, I don't know a single university would not like to get Gartner money to support a Center for Excellence.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay? With that, I'm getting signaled that we need to stop. We're at the end of our time. I want to thank our panel members, Joe, Stacy, Trent, and John, and the audience in Second Life for joining us at this point. I think at this point, Wendy?
Okay, so the breakout sessions are going to begin in about 15 minutes, so they are happening outside of the ballroom on this floor and upstairs.
Thank you, folks.